So hello everyone and welcome to the Virtual French Festival 2021, the Festival du Roman Féminin 2021 in French, organized by Les Romantiques. I'm Françoise and I'm hosting this panel about contemporary romance. I'm delighted to welcome three wonderful authors who join us with this festival. So welcome to Carrie Ann Ryan, Suzie Tullett, and Samantha Young. Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And I'm very glad to discuss about books, our favorite passion. So before we start the discussion, can you briefly present yourself? So we will start with Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Ann Ryan. I live in America, in Texas now, and I have written nearly 100 books in English, and I think almost 40 in French now. So I'm excited to be here.
Suzanne?
I'm Suzie Tullett. I'm a newbie compared to Carrie Ann. I've written 6 novels, and I'm based in Ireland.
And Samantha?
I'm the author of over 40 contemporary and paranormal romances, a few of which have been published in the French language.
Okay. So we will discuss about contemporary romance, even if some authors are writing other genres. But contemporary romance is very global genre because there's so many subgenres. So I would like to start with the global question. Why did you choose to write contemporary romance? And we will start with Suzie.
Because I write contemporary romance with a rom-com slant, but because I'm fascinated in people and relationships and how they develop, not just romantic relationships, but family, friends, and how past experiences impact and affect how we relate to other people. So that's why I write contemporary.
Okay, Samantha?
Well, I actually started out as a paranormal writer, and it was a reader who asked me if I'd think about writing contemporary. So she sent me some recommendations, and I realised it really played into what I love the most, which is characterisation, because that's what really carries contemporary romance, is the development between these two characters and their connection. I've always found that fascinating, why two people connect in ways that other two people might not. So that's kind of why I fell in love with continuing to write contemporary romance.
Okay, and Carrie?
I also started in paranormal romance, and when I moved to contemporary so I could write both, I like seeing broken characters or seeing what I could do to break them, to put them back together, either as a whole person or as part of a half. And I wanted to figure out how to do that where I don't have a mate bond or a werewolf inside them that they're fighting. I want to find another conflict. And so contemporary romance allows me to do that, to find the conflict that doesn't have a paranormal bent.
Okay. And so contemporary sets in the reality of our world. So at which level do you find inspiration from your own life? Samantha?
To an certain extent, quite a bit. I mean, my first contemporary romance, I knew because it was going to be so about the characters and there wouldn't be this huge plot around them, that it had to be authentic in order to be relatable and have an impact. So in Dublin Street, I took a lot from my own loss in life and I put that into it. And throughout, because it starts to get harder once you start writing more and more books, it's just little things from everyday life. It can just be a conversation I've had with someone that kind of sparks an entire story, or you know, even an article that resonated with me because I can relate to it in some way. So yeah, I would say that every book that I write has something in it that comes from a real place.
Mm-hmm. Carrie?
More to what Samantha said, I tend to write towards grief especially recently because of things that have gone on in my own life. And so those are the characters that I'm more drawn to reading and writing. And so how can you overcome it, and how can you find who you are? And that's always been my id. And so finding that path through writing has really helped. But even, hobbies and jobs and things are things that either I know or can easily research. So a lot of my initial characters were all mathematicians and scientists because that was my background. And so going into something a little bit different took speaking to people and finding inspiration through others.
Okay, and Suzie?
Well, I'm sort of the opposite in a way to Carrie Ann, in the sense that I lean towards humour, and I'm always. I said earlier about people fascinating me, and I always find that people can be very funny without realizing just how funny they are. It's just this, a way of being for some people. Everyday things are just humorous. For example, a gentleman that I know, he's so morose, is hilarious, but he doesn't realize that's how he comes across. So my reality is drawn from very much characters that you meet and come across or see. Like Sam said, you're out and about and somebody might say something. So that's where my reality comes in. It's my interpretation of the people around me, and and how they portray themselves without realizing, in the situations that we find ourselves in. So that's my reality, really. It's very much character.
Mm-hmm. And are these people, did you tell them that they inspired you for your novels, or?
If it's somebody I know, or I meet, and they're quite humorous, I will say, oh, that was funny. I might incorporate that if you don't mind. But no, it's more like an amalgamation of people that you come across, or situations that you're in. I would never directly take somebody and put them on paper, because I don't think that's fair. But I do find a lot of my inspiration does come from, the people, sort of around me, when you sat in a cafe, and you hear conversations, so yeah. So I don't very often, have the need to say to somebody, oh, I hope you don't mind when I'm going to pop you in a book, because most of the time I don't know these people.
Okay. So some of you are inspired by people around you or from your background, but do you stick with the reality? So how do you spend a lot of time for research, like, for example, for paranormal romance, or do you allow some deviation from your story and you change something? We'll begin with Carrie.
I do a lot of research for the setting and jobs and things that I don't have. So something I haven't experienced, I need to talk with. And sometimes a lot of research can be searching on the internet and finding the perfect website in 10 minutes and it works. And sometimes it takes a year of me in the background thinking of this one book. But I tend not to deviate too much from what is truth. But with settings, sometimes I'll make up my own neighborhood or my own town and things like that, and I'll put an author note going, this town doesn't exist, or I completely changed this part of Denver, Colorado because I needed it to fit my characters. And so I do spend a time research because I want to get it right, and I enjoy when readers read my books and they say, oh, I know that area, I've been there, or this is my job and you got it right. And I don't like those emails where, no, you did this wrong. So I try not to do that.
Did you receive lots of emails about that, about readers who said you're wrong about some details? Or
for one of my paranormal series, I made up a town in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and it was completely made up, but it was also the same name of a town in Maine, which is on the opposite side of the country. And so I got a few Maine residents who were upset that I took their town name, and it was an accident. And it was very, I feel like they were the same book club or something. I'm not sure what happened, but sometimes I do get some emails, but not too many.
Suzie, what about you?
Again, you know, settings are really important. I do base them. I've done both. Sort of made up a town. The book I'm writing at the moment, I've made up a village, you know, which is completely fiction. But I've also used real places. When I lived in Greece, I lived on an island called Kalymnos, and that was the setting of one of my books. So obviously it had to be right, you know, because, you know, like Carrie Ann said, you know, you do get emails through that go, you know, well, that shop, you know, doesn't exist, or, you know, or whatever. And the same, you know, with living in France, I used my local area, you know, for a setting for a book. And it is important to, you know, if you're going to use a specific name, you know, to get it right. And it goes to credibility, you know, with your writing. You want it to be authentic. So yeah, I do tend to stick to, you know, reality. I don't deviate like with jobs, you know, make sure I do my research, you know, and contact people in that field if it's something that I don't know very much about, because sometimes there's terminology that people use, you know, that shows, you know, brings an authenticity to your work that by Googling you wouldn't necessarily, you know, come up with those little details, you know, you know, that are important for your character to know. So I don't tend to deviate, but I don't, you know, like Sam and Carrie Ann, I don't write paranormal. I don't make up my own worlds, you know, as it were, to that degree.
Okay, and you, Samantha?
Yeah, pretty much the same. The On Dublin Street series is set in Edinburgh, and I lived there for nearly 4 years, so that was pretty easy. I didn't have to research it too much. But when I wrote that one of my characters, my main character, was going to be a librarian at the University of Edinburgh, even though I studied there, I was like, I don't know anything about what being a librarian at a university is like. So they actually let me come in, and the head librarian toured, and he told me about his job from beginning to end. And so I did that. And then when I wanted to set a book in Boston in the US, I decided, I was lucky enough to go there and spent days researching the city, so at least I could write how the city felt, because I think that's a really important part of a setting, is getting it across. And when you can't do that, yes, I will make up a fictional village. Just as Carrie and Susan were saying, if it's something that I don't know enough about, that I've only just kind of like spent maybe a fleeting moment there, then I will make it fictional. My latest book, Much Ado About You, is set in a village in Northumberland. And while I love going there on my holiday, I didn't want to upset any residents by setting it in a real village and getting things wrong. So I was inspired by a real village, but I gave it a totally different name. And that also gives you room to change things as your story grows, just as they were saying. So yeah, there is research, but when I need to, I will deviate and just make it fictional.
Okay, so female readers love romance, but they also love sex scenes in contemporary romance, or all genres of romance. So it's a important topic for readers and for authors. Do you have a particular thought about the number of steamy scenes in your book and the intensity? We'll start with Suzie.
Have I gone red? I have written the odd sex scene, I have to say. I'm not comfortable writing them, and I don't go right up to the wire. For me personally, it depends on the story and it depends on the character, and that the steamy scenes have to be more than just about the sex, you know, or the act. They have to show, they have to be there for a reason, be it the emotional connection at that point that's very important, be it some sort of personal growth for the character. For example, in my last novel, I did write a sex scene, and that was because the character is very body conscious, and it was important for her to start to see her body, you know, in a different way, and that was a way of me to do that, you know. But I much prefer, as a writer and a reader, for the bedroom door to close. You know, as for number of sex scenes, I do think it depends, you know, on your style of writing, and it is important for it to be a reason for it, you know, not just voyeurism, you know, kind of thing. I think there needs to be depth to it. Yeah. I'm embarrassed.
No need to. What about you, Samantha?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the physical relationship should punctuate the emotional relationship. So I don't think there should be any, you know, I think that's the difference between the two genres of erotica and contemporary romance. I think, you know, that what erotica is, and that's great. But for contemporary romance, I think that unnecessary sex scenes deviate from the actual emotional relationship. And maybe that's just how I feel as a reader, because I don't like contemporary romance books that have just sex in it for just it being there. You know, if it feels to me like it's just been thrown in as a kind of word count buffer, then I just think it takes away from all the hard work they've done on the emotional connection between the two characters. So yes, all of my sex scenes are in there for a reason. Something is happening in that moment between the two characters. It's, you know, every other time they're having sex, which is, you know, usually mentioned like bunnies, you don't know about it. That's in the background. So yeah, I agree with Suzie.
Okay, and Carrie?
So I tend to write steamy, but that's because, you know, there's erotica, there's erotic romance, and then there's contemporary. And I could tell from reading Susie's. I read your like I was reading your website and things, and I know we're in two separate genres, which is great because we conform to this exact two separate genres, and there's readers for both. So I tend to write towards, you know, sex is a healthy, can be romantic, can be healing act, and I go decently into detail, not because of the torridness, but because you can find yourself the vulnerability that you need to move towards the next part of the scene. You can find the roughness and the breaking that you need to get to the next part of the scene. You can find the humor as you're bearing yourself to another person in that part of the scene. And so I like to write the steamier side in a very long book. There's not, you know, 18 scenes, but I don't actually count how many. I think maybe 3. Like, I don't actually know. I mean, I do color code them in my outline because I need to make sure that I actually write them or don't write too many. But like, it's more of just the idea of, okay, so have they completed that part of their relationship? Is this going to be a major part of their relationship? Or her backstory is she can't be vulnerable to another person, or even he can't be. So sex scenes are a great way to make that happen, because you need to be vulnerable, even if you're closing yourself off and pretending it's angry sex. There's still a way you can find characterization through that. And so I don't count my sex scenes, but I do make sure that they are there and they're decently elaborate, because that's what my readers enjoy. So that's what I write for them. And I'm up to, I think, over 100 books now. So I mean, I don't blush anymore when I talk about them. It's just okay. And I also dictate my books because I have multiple sclerosis and can't use my fingers. And I have a typist who types for me, and I know him as a person. So I've dictated these scenes to this person, this guy. So at this point, there's no blushing left for me. It's gone.
I feel a book coming on.
Okay, so let's talk about your writing routine now. So for all of your books, are you a plotter? So do you plan your story before writing it? Or are you a pantser? So you write without an outline before beginning to write? So we'll start with Samantha.
I am a plotter. When I first started out, I was very much a plotter. Everything had to be plotted, from the character profiles to the overall plot, and then chapter summaries. And as I've went on and I've got more experience, it's not as heavily plotted, but I do have an outline. And when I get stuck, I will go back to chapter summaries to try and just get my head around what the next few chapters are going to be. That's my characters kind of drive that, because their actions dictate the plot in a way. You know, however they're going to react to something is going to change how the plot moves forward. So I always start with my characters and really work out who they are before I start getting into the actual book. So yes, long story short, I'm a plotter.
Okay, what about you, Carrie?
Really, same to Samantha. It's funny how similar we are, and we don't know each other that well, other than through 1001. I used to have character charts and whole book Bible before I wrote, and now I have a spreadsheet of like character descriptions, and then I have an overall arc written out for the series in terms of like sort of tropes that I want to work in, or major theme that I kind of want to tease in book 1 for book 8. But I do outline each chapter, and I stick pretty much to that outline. But the outlining process takes me a while, because once I get to that part, I don't really move from it. So that needs to be good.
Okay, and you, Suzie?
I'm also a plotter. I start with character. I think I'm very much a character writer rather than I am as, you know, the massive plot. So I do a character profile for my main characters so that I know them inside and out, and then I sort of plot more the story arc. So I know my beginning, my end. I know where I want the story, how I want the story to develop, and make sure that I've got all my plot points, you know, that tell me that the drama is, you know, increasing as the story goes on. And I do like to do like a chapter breakdown, but I've yet to do a full, you know, so many chapters, and I know what's happening in everyone, because you know we all know as writers that we have our characters here and we want them to go on this journey like this, but then they start doing that, you know, because they start to like Samantha said, you know, they dictate how that story develops. So I set off on a journey, and I might sort of detour and then come back to where I wanted to be at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Suzie, you said that you're focused more on the character first than the plot. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I because I think I'm very much interested in people. So I you know, that's how my ideas come. You know, I develop a character, and then I say to myself, well, what's the worst thing that can happen to this person? And from there, that's when the plot starts to develop. So yeah, my starting point is always characters. With every book I've written, that tends to be where the book development comes from. A person.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. And Samantha, do you begin to focus on the characters or on the plot?
Mostly the characters, definitely with contemporary romance, always the characters. But with paranormal, it's funny, for the first book in a paranormal series, it is the character, because it's usually always a heroine that comes to mind. And then as the series goes on, the world just takes on a life of its own. And that really does, the plot really does start to drive the rest of the series. But by that point, you know, most of the, if it is a heroine for the entire series, then, you know, you've already got that starting point. If it's different couples in each paranormal book, like it is for my latest one, I usually have introduced them in the first book anyway, and I can carry that through. But that's why I find paranormal so challenging, because the plot does become such a huge driving force of the whole thing. And sometimes you find yourself trying to push these characters into the plot. And that is where the things start to get tricky, because it sounds strange, but sometimes those characters just don't want to do that. That's not who they are. And I know it's in your head, but it's hard to explain that these feel like real people, you know. They've become kind of three-dimensional, and they start to become little dictators.
Is it the same for you, Carrie?
Yes, even in paranormal romance, where you're like, okay, so I have this big bag demon with a tank, and there's, he's taking over the world, but then I have to worry about the love of these two people. And so, but in contemporary, since we're here for that, I start with my characters because I want to know who they are and how I can break them. And so how I can break them and how I can put them back together. But then it's like Suzie was saying, it's what can I do to hurt them the most, or what can I do to bring them the most. And sometimes, that setting that we were talking about becomes its own character, and so then you're worrying about just multiple things at once. But if I don't start with them, then I can't really figure out what trope I want to use to market and what trope I want to find my path down with an outline. So I need to know who they are before I can break them down later.
Okay. So Samantha, in your readers group, you once asked your readers which trope for contemporary romance they would like you to write for your newsletter subscribers. Yeah. So what are your favorite trope?
It's quite easy for me, actually. It's enemies to lovers. I don't know if it comes from, it sounds cliche, but sometimes cliche is cliche for a reason. Pride and Prejudice, it's like that it's the banter. I absolutely love the banter between two people who are antagonistic, because there's the sexual tension, but sometimes it's just a way to be really witty and funny, especially if it's an angsty book. I like having a balance. I like having moments of levity to just kind of bring things up a little bit throughout it. And enemies to lovers just makes that so easy, because they're just so hilariously mean to each other at first. And it's wonderful to see people. I love when people misunderstand each other and have miscommunications, and something brings them together, and they have this journey actually together rather than individually, where they start to understand who they really are, and more often than not understand that person more than anybody else in the world does, which makes it even more special, I think, in Enemies to Lovers. So yeah, I'll read an Enemies to Lovers book any day and write it any day.
What about you, Carrie?
Mine's actually best friend's sibling. So, it's always that best friend who's always been there. And so you can add tons of things to that. There could be an age gap. It could be enemies to lovers. It could be friends to lovers. It could be exes to lovers because they had a secret relationship back. So I just like that there's always that dynamic of it shifts of how that person is connected to that group of friends and family now. So that's mine.
And you, Suzie?
I don't really think about them as a writer. I love a happy ever after, which is probably why I write contemporary romance. And I think it's, so important, especially these days. We all need, hope. And that's it. When I write, I think about, I want the happy ever after. I want them to be together forever, and but as for the journey for them to get to the happy ever after, I don't really know. I don't think about them. I just have, my characters and my story, and lots of conflict along the way. But I've never sort of analysed my own writing to see if there's a popular theme, that's throughout them, or yeah. I just Maybe when I've written, 40 books like Sam, or over 100 books like Carrie Ann, I'll have a little bit more of an insider knowledge as to, how my characters operate and what the common thing is. But no, I don't think about them.
Mhm.
Maybe that's because I'm writing for myself and not for other people.
As a reader, my favorite trope is second chance romance. I love when there's the couple has already a history between us, and that the hero has to beg on his knees. The longest, the better.
Novel for a while.
Yeah. So thank you very much for discussing about contemporary romance for our French festival. Carrie Ann Ryan, you have several series translated in French. So there is Montgomery Inc. for contemporary romance, which is translated. And for the paranormal romance, it's
The Redwood.
Yes, Grief and Redwood series, which are published by Milady. So Samantha Young, yeah, thank you for showing the book. So Samantha Young, you have your On Dublin Street series, which is a contemporary romance series translated in French by J'ai Lu. And you also write paranormal romance, which are not already translated, but finger crossed for translation. And Suzie Tullett, so your books are not translated yet in French.
No.
But finger crossed too. So you have several books, including The French Escape, which set up in France. So
It's like,
yeah. So thank you again for participating in our French festival. I really hope that you will be able to visit us in France, in Paris, when this pandemic will be over, and that the meetings with readers will be able to. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.